afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Marvel Movie Talk right here on Geekscape. So excited to be back again talking about X-Men 97. As always, I am Christian Blatt, and with us is Nate Miller. And Nate, this is seems like a new friend that we haven't seen before. Eric's always got dogs running around, but not only your dog like Nate, but there's dog like dog in your hands.
This is Freya. You haven't seen her because she's very small, and so she can move around without being seen.
I feel like she made a
But
cameo once
fortunately,
before, though. Right, a Yorkie.
she's. I think she's popped up before. Yeah, she
Yeah.
generally likes to be heard, not to be seen. So
Oh.
we're trying to avoid that right now.
As opposed to Eric's dogs that prefer to be both.
Very much so.
Nice to make your acquaintance, Freya. We'll have to ask Freya if they are Team Eric or Team Charles, but we'll get to that a little bit later. And of course, Eric Connor showing off Charles Xavier's half brother, Kane Marco, the Juggernaut, who essentially made an appearance in this episode, but Morph really messes with the cameos in this show a little bit. So, in any case, as we like to say, coming up a little later will be David Brody, who my understanding is watching from, I don't know, the Jersey Turnpike or somewhere, you know. So, but he'll when he gets home, he will join us. Nate, speaking of all things automotive, I know your vehicular issues kept you from being able to join us last week. So let's start with you, sort of as this storyline with Bastion's been building up, how you feel, heading into this episode, your thoughts on really the last two episodes, big picture stuff.
I think it's great. I love it so much. The action sequences still are consistently satisfying. Each character is having its own moment to shine. And Bastion, I feel like, is being done really well as a villain. Often, especially, I feel like in the last recent years of like superhero media that we got for adaptations, you don't see the superheroes lose, which kind of makes all of the villains feel kind of weightless because they never win. They just kind of come in and present an evil plan and then it fails immediately. So seeing that Bastion has been kind of pulling the strings all season long, and that a lot of those breadcrumbs they've been dropping haven't just been like Easter eggs or red herrings, but actually like breadcrumbs showing you who has been pulling the strings. I think he's going to make for a really memorable and impactful villain. So I'm really happy with it.
I think I had myself on mute a second ago, didn't I?
I wasn't sure if it was just me.
Yeah. That's all right.
Both of us had that awkward, like, do we say anything? Because it was kind of relaxing.
We'll fix it in post, except of course it's a live stream. But
we're good. I'll write it. We'll do it live.
Yeah. I think that it's nice that this show is taking a page out of the X-Men and the X-Men comic books, and everything's not going to be okay next issue, or maybe not even in 10 issues. There'll be moments where it's like, oh, things are less awful, but in general, things are pretty bad when you're the X-Men, and this season has definitely reflected that in a lot of ways, I think. So I think that I do feel like episode 10 is not going to be a total bummer. I'm not going to lie. I think that they don't want to leave us with that taste in our mouth, but it'll probably seem like, oh, everything's going to be okay, and then something terrible happened at the end. Eric, how did you feel? I say Eric as soon as Magneto comes on the screen, but I mean Eric Connor to differentiate.
I know we have very similar build and very similar hair. And I'll tell you, this show has, just really put a lot of Marvel properties to shame. It has been consistently great. Nate, you were talking about the action scenes. One thing I've really noticed, and I obviously take a lot of sort of screen grabs for the show, is how many beautiful sort of like tableaus there are. kind of like comic book panel worthy moments. There was one I grabbed where it was Eric's Eric's tattoo from the concentration camp in the foreground, with everything else in the background, and it's just like one of those details, very cinematic. They perpetually, I think, are finding these great sort of hero type moments or moments of despair, moments of agony, very emotional moments. Yeah, that one tableau, although her expression's a little dowdy, um, but I was just like, wow, like that's a bold choice, and I think they find a way in every episode to sneak in a few moments like this that are just really like kind of next level, like not just the something we say a lot in writing classes, like not the plot, not just the plot, but the story. And I think this is an image that shows story. I think this episode was so good. I watched it twice, so packed and yet didn't feel like I was choking on it. Like it felt like story wise, it all tracked. Like it wasn't just a lot of the great, it wasn't just the hits. And so I think they set them up beautifully for these last, is it 2 more episodes?
There's 2 more episodes, yes,
Yeah.
sir. And quick programming note, we'll let people know on the side. All 3 of these episodes we're going to be at this time, Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. And for Kemi Egan, yes, that's 2 Central, noon Pacific. So we kind of want to get in on Wednesday when everybody's going to be talking about these final episodes. So make sure that you join us as we kind of bring these down. Our pal Daniel Drew had a great observation. So much happened. It's great that Bastion's parents were in One Man's Worth. Brilliant EMP from Eric, not Connor, but Lensher, aka Magneto. I gave him Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Hydra agents revealed on the world map files. Yeah, I mean, you've sort of seen a lot of sci-fi does sleeper agent stuff. It's reminiscent of plots in Doctor Who in the last 10 years, where just all of a sudden you have like everybody's like activated and you're like, okay, it's like almost everybody. I thought that was nicely done. Of course, a town outside of Pittsburgh is going to be our undoing. I don't think anybody was shocked by that plot point, but I did think that sort of getting the connection very clearly in this timeline, in this universe, in this series, the fact that Bastion's father was Nimrod, and as Daniel pointed out, the parents seen in One Man's Worth. So I don't believe that they were planting these seeds, because I don't believe that the character of Bastion had appeared in 1994 or whenever that episode aired. But it's great being able to use the what you've already got in your established canon and then pulling in all this other X-Men stuff. And look, I know for a fact I would not be able to do this as well as they do. It would get so confusing if you put me in charge of this. Well, if you put me in charge of this, that scene with Logan and Kurt would have been the whole episode, and then we would have caught up with everybody else next week. But you know what I'm saying? It's just there's so much to sort through, and just all the little characters to keep in mind. And it is they're doing a phenomenal job with this, still finding time for great character stuff. And I was very much impressed by this episode. And now we're at the point I'm like, wait, I can't believe there's only 2 more of these. It felt like we still had a lot more right up until this one ended. And
Although, you know what though, in some ways, this almost felt like, oftentimes, like the best episode of a season of TV isn't the finale, but the penultimate episode. And
yes,
I kind of had
the
these vibes.
the David Chase approach to
Yeah,
doing a
yeah, yeah.
season. The last episode you could skip, but the one before it was always
Right.
huge. Yeah, I'm sorry. Finish your thought, Eric.
No, I was just saying, like, I felt like, I double checked that it was 2 more episodes, because I thought I knew that, but when I watched this, I really felt like this was kind of bringing everything to like that sharp point. So I'm perfectly happy if this thing had another 6 episodes, but it does feel like they've ramped this thing up really nicely, and raise the tensions, raise our expectation, but still, we haven't had Storm and Magneto come back quite yet. Although Magneto does at the end.
Magneto lends a hand, as we could say.
Though I do have
And
questions about that.
Well, that's all right. We will get to all of
yeah.
it. But I saw a comment in the chat from Daniel Drew that literally, it makes me think he's hacked my phone because these are all things that are in my notes. He loved the Carmitage reference from Beasts, talking about that concept of fixed points in time, possibly in every timeline, that you can't do anything to tamper with them. And just the aside, by the way, thinking about Genosha and a lot of the things we've been talking about, this series is set in 1997. So of course, when we see the New York City skyline, we see the Twin Towers, and it just sort of it takes you back for a moment. But you're like, yeah, this is 1997. So we got Carmitage, we got cameos from Doctor Doom, who speaks in the episode. Zemo speaks, Spidey, but let's not forget we also saw Silver Samurai. And we also saw Omega Red wake up. And Polaris and Rachel, as Cable was talking about the future, they went the extra mile and gave us like an older Polaris because it was supposed to be in the future. But so yeah, I mean, and we've already established Morph as Juggernaut, so just like, I don't know. I feel like most people, when they watch a show that they like, shouldn't be looking down at their phone or distracted by other things. But this is a show that if you look away, you're gonna miss a cameo more often than not, you know. So I think that we've sort of got into all that stuff, but and I want to kind of go through all of it. And I'm just thinking, I guess we'll kind of go a little bit chronologically. Magneto's part in this story, we will certainly get to. It was very important, though. And, I'll go first with this family. They point themselves out as the Summers family, as Jean and Scott and little Nathan, who we all know as Cable. And I think that those scenes together, there's definitely, I don't know, just a couple of moments of soap opera melodrama, Nate. But talk about the dynamic we got throughout this episode between Cable and specifically with Jean and Scott.
I enjoyed it. It reminded me. It reminds me a lot of the comics of like. There's always multiple plot threads running, and one of them is always like a family plot thread, some type of family relationship conflict, or and there's the seatbelt line. Like Gene had a bunch of good quips and stuff, but also just like again, really showing off the incredible animation that we've been getting, like that chase sequence. That was just, it was so cool. Like seeing Cable in the back blasting while Cyclops is drilling a hole through a wall. Like the child in me was like, this is incredible. This is awesome. Cable's always been like a really cool character, and in the show, like he hasn't been, he's been kind of more of like a guest than like a reoccurring cast member.
Yeah.
So getting to see more of him specifically, like what he's trying to do with time travel and stuff, is exciting. It feels like it's been like a long time coming. It's a really satisfying payoff, and I think they're handling the characterization well of like him not really caring for Jean because that's not really his mom.
Yeah.
And then his relationship with Scott because he never grew up with him. It's very, I think they're setting up for some really good stuff. The Summers family has a lot of good family drama with all the characters and long lost people that come back, and Rachel and all the future kids and the half kids and the clones. There's all kinds of stuff, but I think so far they've been handling it really well. It hasn't felt too melodramatic where it's kind of like out of place.
Yeah.
And like I said, they're really cool characters. So getting to see them all do their thing and do their like, if that superhero landing that they had lasted maybe like one frame longer, it probably would have been a little cheesy, but it was like just long enough to be like, wow, that's cool. And then they moved on. So I was happy with it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Eric, I want to get your thoughts on the man called Cable, as it said on the cover of New Mutants '87, his first appearance. What are your thoughts on the man called Cable?
Well, Nate, what you're saying about sort of the family drama, and my friend Karen, yes, I'm name checking her. She and I were chatting about the show.
But
And
you know an actual Karen, and
I
you're
know a
proud of
Karen.
it.
I know a Karen, and she was not. She wasn't a Karen about it, but she did find some of this melodramatic. And I realized, like, okay, was that true to the comics? Well, yeah, because there is sort of melodrama to the family stuff, and in some ways it's like, but that's okay. I mean, they don't necessarily have the space to be super subtle with these things, you know. You can't do 6 feet under when you only have so many panels. And so, like, I think they do. I agree with you, Nate. I think they balance it nicely. That moment of Cable sitting at that bench, I loved, because it was like, it almost looked like he should be feeding pigeons, except he's this big burly guy in this bench that it looks like it's going to break under his weight in another 5 seconds, and he's just sitting there with his massive gun out, and he's like
Yeah,
looking at him like a father to his son, like, oh, look at our little boy. He's there with a
yeah.
gun that could take out
It's
half a town.
it's very. Mama said life is like a box of
Yeah.
grenades. You never know what you're gonna get, and somehow that
He
turned
also,
into.
I mean, he has a line too, which I thought was like, it's one of those ones that you're like, and then you think about it more, and you're like, that's crazy. He asked him, how many times have you gone back and tried? And he's like, and failed. And he's like, I've done it enough to give up. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
right.
crazy. You have time travel, and like, and so he watched them die over and over
Right.
and
And he keeps
over
getting
again.
pulled
Like,
out. Yeah,
that's
and
Yeah,
that's
crazy.
we talked about that too, right? We talked about, like, well, why doesn't he go back a little sooner? And so this idea of, like, is something in the cosmic travel, something in time travel won't allow him to go back enough to fix it. And I think, like, you're right, it's tragic. And so you can see why this guy maybe is a little cold around the heart, to put it mildly, with his family.
yeah. No, I agree, and I would say that
Ooh,
a
thank
lot of.
Donna is offering us a loan. I don't want to miss that.
It's it's easier to just ignore those, Eric. But in any case, besides, I already have an account with the Bank of Ghana, and someone who I believe is the chairman of the Bank of Ghana is our buddy David Brody,
Brody.
our local Brooklyn boy. Thank you for being here.
Curious.
Sure. Just
Trying
finishing
to-
up at the bank, Christian. Sorry, I'm late.
Right, exactly. I don't know why you asked me for my social security number, and I don't know what took 22 minutes, but that's all right. I'm sure that everything's on the up and up. Brody, now that you're here, give us your thoughts on Cable, who again is a newer character, not from your era of reading the X-Men.
Yeah,
but,
my real first exposure to Cable was Deadpool 2.
right.
So I knew who he was, but I really didn't read the comics. So I like the character. I'd like to get past his animosity towards Cyclops, because he doesn't have animosity towards his mother, and they both sent him off to the future.
Well, she's dead, so he. I
Yeah,
guess,
yeah, but he came back and fondly tried to save her, and he's talking about his mother. He shoved him in that into the future also. So
well,
just to be clear.
No, I know it's he's got a lifetime of having a chip on his shoulder, despite the fact that what they did was save his life.
Yeah. Now, is he older than Cyclops, or is the gray hair just throwing me off?
Right. Is he Steve Martin, who went gray at 26?
Was it
Yeah.
Frost?
He
Maybe
is older than
it's the thing.
Cyclops.
He's very old. I don't think it's established in this timeline, how old he is at this point. But yeah, he has lived a long time. Also, all that time travel, and that was sort of the point I want to make. When you are opening the door for time travel, you do have to make concessions and rules. I referenced Doctor Who earlier. That is a show that always talks about fixed moments in time. And you usually, when you're doing a fictionalized story about time travel, as opposed to all the actual real life time travel, you'll usually put real world events, these are things that happen that you can't do anything about. The Kennedy assassination, 9/11, those sort of things. And in this case, Genosha just is one of those things. And we saw him try. I think some of us thought that perhaps what was going to happen was that we saw him fail, but then we would get an episode where he succeeded. But Daniel somewhere talked about that Bo DeMeo again was tweeting about the show and just saying something about here. Actually, no, you know what? I apologize. It was our buddy Craig Robinson across the pond. Did you see the Bo DeMeo tweet that said time travel won't save the day this time, ... Poor Gambit. Still not convinced that they've killed off Gambit. But at some point, I guess I would have to come to terms with it. But I think that we're getting Cable in a way that he's playing in the sandbox of the X-Men. I think when he's off by himself, I think that the stories can go a little bit more sideways. So I like seeing him around with everybody. Craig Robinson also asked, did they borrow the time travel rule from the Christine episode of What If? Figure, as they mentioned, Karmatage. I think that basically makes sense. And yes, Daniel Drew. Time travel has always been kind of a cause and effect in X-Men. Yes, the Days of Future Past storyline from Uncanny 141, 142 is really the basis for all of the time travel stories that have followed in the 45 years since almost. And, it's a lot of people visiting from timelines that have not come to be. We talked about Rachel Summers earlier, who we saw a glimpse of in this. So I think we'll have to see how they play with all that stuff.
Right. I loved Nightcrawler's comment when he said, "Oh, another future that Logan's the last one to survive."
Yeah. Right, exactly. I did like that. And I'm glad you mentioned Logan, because I do want to talk about him for a moment, just for the simple reason that we've talked about how much of this season has been kind of not in spite, but just without really the participation of Logan. And, it's not that he hasn't been there, but he hasn't had big moments. And we finally get to see him really, and yes, pun is definitely intended, cut loose in this episode. And this is the Wolverine that those of us who grew up as huge fans of the character enjoyed the stories where we were told that there would be a body count of more than 100 pirates and the monthly Wolverine #1. Sign me up for it. It being animation, it's usually got to be some kind of robot that he can cut, but however it worked, I could not have been happier with that sequence, because, he gives a very Wolverine response that he's got 6 reasons. And there's Kurt to say it's actually 9.
9.
9. Yeah, not that 9, but 9. Yeah. So Brody, as somebody I know who, values that iteration of the X-Men as much as I do, the one that had Nightcrawler and Wolverine, and we don't get much Colossus, but that's all right. What did you think of Logan in this episode, Brody?
Oh, by far my favorite episode, because Nightcrawler's back. I thought the sword work with the 3 swords was terrific. Yeah. But when the episode first started and Wolverine stabbed the television with his claws, I thought, okay, that's his input again. They're going to just have him stab a television, and then he's going to go back to complaining in the background. So the fact that he was involved and he shredded his uniform and that face was constant. This was the Wolverine that I've been complaining about not seeing the whole season. It's about time he got to let loose. And as you said, he had some robots he could stab, although they were actually people robots. So he sort of was killing or stabbing people. So I counted as both.
But they kept reforming. So, it's
right.
It's
no
okay.
harm, no foul, Disney. Yeah, it's all good.
Well, they also self-volunteered to join a hate group.
It's a great point.
No sympathy for the
I'm just saying
human
they went out of their
nationalists.
way to make sure that even though they are technically humans, they're bad humans, so they're okay.
They're bad humans.
I like the 2 that were a family, so I guess they met there and then had kids, and then
they've got pickup trucks with "fuck mutants" flags on them as they drive down the street.
Well, yeah, I think that also, they featured heavily in the original series, including in the opening episodes of the 92 version, friends of humanity. The first word there was friends. So obviously people are going to meet in some of those circles, and I thought that getting to see Wolverine just cut loose like this. It's not full Wolvie berserker style that we grew up with in the late 80s and early 90s. But Eric, your thoughts on getting to see Logan, and both of these images we've been sharing are ones that you sent to me.
Yeah, and as I'm watching this, I did think of Brody, as I often do late at night and
What was I
early in the
wearing?
morning. Oh,
You were
only
wearing the brown
the things
suit
that
because this yellow one is ghastly.
I
the
love
things
the
that
yellow
dreams are
one.
made of.
Yeah, agree
Yes,
to
this is your
disagree.
costume.
Thank you.
Specifically that part.
Yep.
Yeah, but like this was Wolverine as we love Wolverine, but also Wolverine and Nightcrawler back to back. I posted a photo. I found the back to back moment of Wolverine and Sabretooth from the X-Men movie We Do Not Speak, of featuring a word like origin in it.
Did you
And
wait? You sent that to me as part of the email you sent me like 30 seconds before we started.
Indeed,
Yeah.
just in
Okay.
time. Thank you. And
Yeah.
that's a funny way of
Which
saying thank you.
I hate how often we're talking about X-Men Origins Wolverine right now, because I always have to point out that Liev Schreiber as Sabretooth is actually phenomenal in that movie. He's so
Of
good,
course he is.
and it's so wasted.
I know.
Ryan Reynolds as that Deadpool, not as good. But yeah, it's a very Wolverine.
I
Sort
didn't
of
want to trick.
thing.
In fact, you notice I used this image instead of when they went back to back, fighting the faux Deadpool, because I didn't want to trigger
Right.
anyone. So I specifically found this early back to back moment. But that fight scene was so great, and one of the guys in the chat here mentions like kind of on par with like the White House, the great Nightcrawler White House scene in X-Men 2. And
Yeah.
I think, that to me is like Nightcrawler is the one that you realize like that is such a rich character, and visually the fact that he finally had a sword was great, and anytime he can use his tail. And I also love the point of view shot when it means to Bamf, when
Oh,
it
that was
was all
so
of a
cool.
sudden like being inside Lightspeed in Star Wars, where you feel just like the thing got stretched. I thought that was a really cool creative decision. When I don't recall if they did that in the original cartoon, but it felt new to me, and I love that. Love that one little beat.
No, I agree. I mean, that's sort of that's why I think Brody and I are in agreement that this sequence is sort of everything we want from a show like this. Kurt and Logan, basically against the world at that point. Nate, I wanted to get your thoughts on getting to see Wolverine be the best he is at what he does, and what he does, of course, is not very nice.
It was awesome. I love Wolverine. So I was not on the like upset that we haven't got that much Wolverine doing cool stuff train, only because Wolverine is always on the front of every X-Men property, and so like I am not upset about them not like putting him in the front, at least so far.
Yeah.
But this was a really satisfying spot to put him in, like we talked about, like having the story element of having like modified humans that are attacking them just totally enables Wolverine to like actually like do Wolverine things. And then that with the combination of him with Kurt, who like he just also his design is just so good. Just the scene where he's like uh there was just a scene of him talking. I just remember looking over at my partner being like, his design is just so good. It looks like so like expressive and like just like what you want from the character, like right out of the page. And when I saw the swords fall off of the mantle, like I was like, oh, it's happening. It's happening. I'm so excited. It's about to happen. Yeah, it was great. The throwing Wolverine up into the air and him slicing them down on the way down, like, just chef's kiss stuff.
Yeah. Oh
And
no, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
and then too, like you get the double benefit of that, of now you get to see these guys cut loose and be badasses. And then also they're still behind because there's just too many of them and they keep coming back. And so you get to elevate the threat and make it menacing while also still not without like diminishing the heroes and making them look weak or anything. Like they looked badass. It's just they're facing an insurmountable threat. It was great. And
Yeah.
two, added the dynamic that they're protecting Rogue as well. was very touching. I like that they are actually addressing the sibling relationship with Rogue and Nightcrawler.
Yeah, in the last few episodes, they've really done a good job in highlighting that. And, in this episode, Kurt has the line of, blood is blood, but family is choice. And, just the fact that Mystique could not have wanted any less to do with him. And
So,
that he
I mean,
still found
speaking of
family.
Mystique and characters, speaking of characters that have not got a lot of screen time, there's no way we get through this whole season and we don't see Mystique,
I agree.
right?
I
So,
there's, I think somebody in the chat was wondering if Val Cooper was going to be revealed as Mystique, which in the comic books, at one point, she did masquerade as Val Cooper for quite a long time, actually.
I think letting
Still not
Magneto
out of the
go
question.
concealed that for me.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Because I think setting up, I think her letting Magneto loose,
Yeah.
while it on the one hand it does kind of cheapen that decision of based on the things that she saw, her being like, I can't be a part of this. It does also make sense for there to be this was Mystique all along, and Magneto had planned to get somebody inside because he didn't trust them, and then for them to also double down on the Rogue Nightcrawler parent relationship with Mystique and then not have Mystique in the show, it doesn't make sense to me. So I think this is really confirming that theory for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I expect very much to see her. Just before we move off, Kurt, the way we've gotten to see Nightcrawler in this season so far has been great. It has been all the aspects of the character we like. But the reason I'm sharing this image is because in the opening credits, when we see Nightcrawler every week, they use the logo for his miniseries from 1985 that Dave Cockrum did. And it's the little touches like that where you're like, oh yeah, the people involved really care. They're giving us a good Nightcrawler. They're using, which is actually, it's a pretty sweet logo as your comic book miniseries go. So I think that it really has been a highlight getting to see him, because he is a character that has really been underutilized in so many different ways. One of the characters I want to make sure we talk about is sort of something that I believe, Brody, you and I have wanted and finally got to see. And that is Roberto da Costa as Sunspot, actually as Sunspot. I'm not going to lie, I didn't remember that he could fly, but that's all right. Well, it seems to have worked for this episode, but we finally got to see him. And I wanted to get your thoughts first, Brody, on the Roberto storyline with him and Jubilee and Roberto's parents having a just his mom really having that fundraiser.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they're hiding the father, unless, like what I said last week, is he's going to be such a prick that they have to let the mother accept him because the father never would. Yeah. And so they're just not going to have him until, maybe next year. How many times does he have to almost die before he realizes he's a mutant? So it was nice to see him save his own life and then save Jubilee. He went from, I don't want to use my power to, not only I use my power, I could fly. And, so yeah, it was about time that he stopped. You want to keep it in hiding. That's one thing, but you got to save your own life at some point. So it was nice to see Sunspot be Sunspot. I vaguely remember him flying. I know Cannonball flew. I don't. Yeah.
That was Cannonball's whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So. It's such a long time ago, but I vaguely remember Sunspot flying. But again, to go from, I don't know how to use my powers that well, to learning how to fly because he practiced in the danger room seemed like a stretch, but I'll take it.
I thought it was interesting that, Jubilee, who, by the way, did say that she's done with the malls now, but that flies in the face of everything that we've had with that character. But I do love it. There's something about storming out on your family when you're upset and bringing your butler with you, who was there to help them shop. It loses a little bit of the impact. It's like, well, I say good day. Jeeves, please come along with me. I don't know what his
but are we supposed to assume, based on what we discussed earlier, that the butler is an anti-mutant and he volunteered to be made into a robot?
I think that's an accurate assumption. I was going to get Nate's thoughts specifically on the butler and of course Sunspot's storyline in this episode.
So probably the only minor major issue that I have with this show right now is Sunspot. And it's not necessarily the show's fault. It's just kind of like a Marvel Comics thing that's happened over the last couple of years. Like when Sunspot first came out, major part of his character was that he was black, and interacting with anti-blackness is part of what causes him to decide to become a hero and embrace his powers. And that's also why intentionally when he transforms, he turns like all black, right?
Right.
So to kind of strip that from him almost entirely is kind of frustrating for me, and I think it has caused the character to be kind of to not make as much sense as I know they should. And especially now that we got a little bit more of his backstory and like some plot progression with him this episode, and there's still no mention of that, I feel like it is kind of harming the character's arc.
Yeah, no,
That
it's a
being
good
said-
point. I mean, look, the character's always been from Brazil, but to your point, that if you were to look at, the early run of the New Mutants, he is portrayed much darker than he is here. And
Right.
Nate, until you said it, I didn't even notice it. So
Yeah,
that's
so a lot of
yeah.
I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it. And yes, he is Brazilian, but the whole point is about him being an Afro Latino, and like the dichotomy of the even in the Brazil in there are light skinned Brazilians, there are dark skinned Brazilians, and not everyone is treated the same. So that it's part of I wish that they had gone at least a little bit into that, especially with some of the breakneck speed they've covered some stuff. I don't think it would have cost them too many minutes. But all that being said, I'll shoot him some bail with the Danger Room stuff, because they have shown that he's been hanging out with Jubilee and they're hanging out at the mansion, and like he has also said, like, it's not that he hates his powers, it's that he doesn't want to be judged and he doesn't know what his family's going to think. So like I could see him being like, oh, there's this room where in private I can practice this thing I can do, and I don't have to worry about if anybody sees me or what anybody's going to think or anything. And then when you're in that fight or flight mode, you're like, okay, well, I guess it's time to fly. Well, fight and fly. Fight while
Right.
flying. That was a
You
bad
can- analogy
for that.
Well, you can
specific
fly and
period.
run. You can fight and fly. I mean, when you can
fight and
fly,
fly.
you can kind of handle it any way possible.
Um,
To the point of everything you're saying, Nate, there's still room in these last couple episodes, or at least in another season, where maybe they could explore that. Now, there's been a lot of opportunity where it's missed, but do you feel like, oh, okay, like say that it somehow comes up next episode, will you feel like, all right, they saved it, or have they already kind of missed the mark by not dealing with it already?
If they go into it with the same kind of level of writing that they've approached a lot of the other heavier topics, I'm sure it will be good. But the way the direction is going, and especially this episode, it seems more like they're just leaning into he's a rich kid and rich parents that are like detached, and like they want to be helpful. They want to be, there's a lot of really heavy political themes in this episode. And this idea that there's people that want to support mutants and they'll throw fundraisers for mutants because what happened was terrible and we want to be a part of the solution. But then immediately turns their child over because they're a mutant to law enforcement that shows up, using violence. I think they're going to lean more into that kind of class disconnect and then into the anti-blackness part of it. I don't think that there is like, I don't think that there's, I don't think there's anything anti-black in them not going down that avenue. I just don't think that is the direction that they're going in with the character. Especially with the fundraiser and the butler coming and the this is so upsetting, but you know how you can make it better for me? You can buy this new fancy suit that I got. Like funny jokes, but I think they're that again, like the writing in the show is pretty intentional, and I think they're kind of setting that up. Especially too, remember he's apparently pursuing a relationship with Jubilee, who comes from a very different background, right? And I don't think that the show is going to not address that.
Right. No, I think they are taking, sort of a character in Jubilee who I feel like was largely underserved in the original series, but also just because there's so much more time spent with the character. I do hope we never see her turn into a vampire, but we don't need to get into
Also,
that
if
now.
this is 97 and she just turned 18, so she was
Yeah.
13 in the original show.
Yeah, that tracks. I mean, Kitty Pryde was 13 when she joined the
So it's also
X-Men. So
understandable why she was not around
yeah, that's fair.
too much, especially in the later seasons when they really got into some of the comic stuff.
Well, the problem with Jubilee fundamentally is that she's Dazzler in a raincoat. I mean, and so trying to figure out. I do like the moment where she's like, "Well, maybe I can try and figure out how to use my powers, how to fly." Oh no, I can't. I'm falling now towards the ground. I was like, I feel like that's a pretty real moment, because a lot of times, especially on shows, it's like, hey, what if I try this thing? Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel can't fly, but she figured out a lot of ways to do it. They had her stumble, but she's like, yeah, okay, but I can still kind of get by.
But she didn't
Jubilee's
jump off a building yet. Like she didn't
No,
jump off a building to figure it out.
I also never understand why they do
maybe
that. Like,
maybe the school systems in
See-
Jersey City is a little bit better than in Irvine or whatever mall.
It's like
it
in The
is,
Boys when he pushes his kid off the roof.
Yeah,
and he just
fly.
breaks
falls
his arm.
Eric, while we're still talking about Sunspot and his family dynamic, I wanted to get your thoughts sort of on this aspect of the episode that featured he and Jubilee, and the fact that ultimately they get taken away in those collars at the towards the end of the episode.
Well, I mean, really, what could mom have done at that point? Even even if she supported and loved him, it's still kind of like, yeah, I got no moves here. Like, sorry, but I think that Nate, like you're saying, like they're just leaning real hard into the kind of New York City upper crust, the sort of the private school crowd, and I think maybe that's, but in terms of the whys, kind of why they're leaning so hard in that is because maybe they're also trying to not make the intolerance culturally specific on that end. I'm not sure. So I was thinking about like, why wouldn't they? Like, yeah, she
Yeah.
had the casting, the dialogue clearly has the lilt, the accent from Brazil, but I think by not leaning super hard into that, then this sort of attitude the mom strikes here is much more about kind of the keeping up with the Joneses. Like, how will this look? Worried about their
Yeah.
money, worried about perception. And yeah, that moment when he basically comes out as a mutant at her party, she's more concerned about how that's looking than about
Yeah.
her son's health, well-being, safety. And that's the moment that really struck me hard, was like she looked more nervous when everyone at the party heard what he was than that moment here when she says basically do what the men say. And so I think I would love to see a little more of the cultural specificity of these characters, but again, I think by making it so much like he comes from wealth, privilege, everything he could ever, in theory, hope for, but not support, I think it's just one of those like themes that's pretty universal. And then of course now we're going to wait to see, like, well, what will she do about it? She can raise money for the cause, and I think we talked about this last time. It's like, you're okay when something's over there, but when it's in your face, when it's in your home, you might not be that same okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Sunspot's mother, it's sort of a character type we see, in fiction, but also throughout history. There's so I know it's 40 years old, but the miniseries V, they have all the aliens that are there, and you have sort of the wealthy elite that's like, well, we're going to cozy up to these people, and even after they find out, yeah, they're going to steal your water and eat you. It's like, well, they're not going to eat me, and just sort of, stories, out of the Nazis, people who tried to carry favor. I mean, somebody said, hey, there's this family up in the factory in Amsterdam, so you always have those people who are like, how does this work for me? I can't worry about anyone else. And so I think that it is, and to the point that Brody's been making, not getting Roberto's father I think it's another shoe that will drop, but it's very consistent with the way that his family was always portrayed. Brody, did you have a thought a moment ago? I saw you very politely raise your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Nate said. In the comics, Sunspot's father is Afro-Brazilian, right? But his mother's white in the comics, which they clearly changed. And so my thought, because the X-Men from Giant Size X-Men 1 were a Benetton ad, right? They were Canadian, a black woman from Africa, a German guy, a Russian guy. And so when the New Mutants were created, I think Roberto DaCosta's role in that real world episode, right, was to be the black guy in the group. But I think now in this show, you have Storm, you have Bishop, you don't have any Hispanic members of the X-Men, and it's possible they're leaning on the Hispanic end of it because they need to have a Hispanic representation. And for storytelling purposes, they'll get to the part that his father's black. Maybe that's why they haven't brought him in yet to really focus on that. His family came from slavery in the comics, so I think it's about him making his mother Hispanic, is giving him the Hispanic role in the show as opposed to filling a need they already have. So I think he gets more prominence as the only Hispanic rather than the third black person in the show. That just from a producer standpoint, that's what it seems to me. But there's a great article on sci-fi.com about how they took the blackness away from his character, which I looked up as soon as Nate mentioned. I'm like, I thought I read something about that a while ago. So there is an article about that. It's a conscious effort, but I'm wondering if it's because they need to amp up the Hispanic part of his character as opposed to downplaying the black part. Just a thought.
I mean, I think it's the idea is as long as they address both at some point. I think because you have sort of, and I actually forgot that his mother was white in the comic books. You have the opportunity to kind of tell both parts of his story, and he is a fairly minor character. I mean, he's not even an X-Man. I mean, he's a member of the New Mutants. Going into this, he's still not an X-Men. He's just kind of hanging out with them. So I think the character was carefully chosen to be included. I mean, he's gotten a fair amount of screen time already in these 8 episodes. So we want to see where that goes before we move on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nate. Yeah, no, go ahead.
It very much feels like the Sunspot Jubilee stuff. And I said this, I think when I first came on with you guys, it feels like they're building towards a spinoff. It's got that like underlying plot feeling of like, we want you to see that these characters exist and that they're growing and they're relevant. They've been here for these things, but they're not super growing. Like we're not getting super deep into them, but they're here and time is happening. And eventually they're going to branch off and do their own thing. That's still what it feels like to me, because we have gotten so much of them, but at the same time, not really that much. Like every time we see them, they're not really involved in like the main story. They're usually kind of doing their own thing. There was the one episode that focused on Jubilee, obviously, but outside of that, they've been like in the background of like each episode.
Yeah, I could see them building like a Generation X around those two. I mean, Jubilee did end up on Generation X in the early 90s. I don't know if they would still call the team that. It's sort of an antiquated term at this point. But I think you're right. I forgot we had talked about that. You had brought it up. That idea that they could be planning more with these characters. Before we move on, I wanted to address something that I thought. Daniel Drew. Is that outfit Jubilee chooses referring to anything specific she wears in the comics? I couldn't tell. I think that it's more of a nod to something that is referenced in the final trailer, and it's a play on something. Brody, you had texted me about this yesterday. But there's this moment at the end of the trailer that's I think we thought was going to be in this episode. Daniel Drew asked if we just missed it, but I think we'll see it. But here's something that's a bit of a callback.
Almost forgot.
Oh, am I going to war or a circus?
What'd you expect? Black leather?
And so that's the play on from the original X-Men movie where they say to Wolverine, "What did you expect? Yellow and black spandex." So I think that the Jubilee in the leather is also sort of a nod to that. I don't know an outfit like that. I think she always had. I don't even remember her. I mean, no matter they lived in the the outback in Africa, and she's still wearing that damn raincoat. It literally never rains. Toto wrote a song about it. It doesn't rain.
Toto lied to us all.
I know that's Africa and that's Australia. I'm just saying. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's what that was. It's sort
It
of
never rains in California.
moment. Yeah. So in any case, I think that we're getting some fun nods there. So obviously, Professor Xavier looms over this episode, but the sort of the key for this episode, I think, really is Magneto and this idea that Bastion's got plans for him, but he's holding him hostage, and it never takes much for guys like Magneto and characters like Hannibal Lecter. When you need them to get out, they usually can find a way. And I think that I actually expected, and perhaps we will get this revealed, that Bastion always expected Magneto to kind of do this, because showing the kind of power he has and sort of the consistency that, he goes to the South Pole so he can really do this like global EMP and really just take things out, I thought was incredibly well done and consistent with the sort of the massive power set that we see from Magneto, fairly regularly throughout. Gosh, he's been around for 65 years. I'm sort of losing track at the moment, but you know what I'm saying. I wanted to kind of go ahead. Did you have something, brother?
No, I just didn't figure him for a boxer bikini briefs kind of guy. The little underwear they put him in. It wasn't.
That was the most Chris Claremont thing I've ever seen.
Well,
and like he was able to do all this. He escapes, and he doesn't even stop. I mean, he's flying all over. He doesn't just grab someone's clothes off a clothesline somewhere. He just is like, you know what? Nope. I need all my flesh in order to make this.
Yeah, to go to the coldest place on the planet.
Right.
By the way, if this was a comic book story drawn by Jim Lee, he would not have had the bikini briefs. They would have shown exactly as much as the Comics Code Authority would let them, and they would have kept the long hair just so they
would have had the banana hammock.
No, or an icicle right in front of his
with the M on it.
Yeah,
a little magnet would be hanging off of it.
So it makes it really culminates in something, and because of how this was a moment for Sunspot to shine. I thought I thought I knew which shirt I was going to wear when we did this, but instead I went with Team Eric from X-Men First Class, because Val Cooper, or possibly Mystique, says Magneto was right. And it is one of those defining moments. It's I think that you can look at history in a lot of ways, but you're like, oh yeah, well, Charles and Magneto are both right. It's just sort of an idea of kind of exploring that. What do you think, Nate, about the way they show off, Magneto, just what he's capable of, and I finally had enough. Let me just take care of this and see what happens, Nate.
Oh, it's so good. The fact that he doesn't even think about it. He's just like, no, that thing that I thought about doing a bunch of times, I was like, I shouldn't do that. No, I know exactly what I'm going to do. He said, fuck this. I'm turning the world off. It was crazy. It was, and also, have you guys read Fatal Attractions? It was a.
I lived it.
No, you're but not the
it's
Michael
about the
Douglas
rabbit.
Movie. No, that's what I'm saying. Not the Michael Douglas movie.
I should have clarified the X-Men story arc, Fatal Attraction.
I was still on board when Fatal Attractions happened. Yes.
Yeah, so he does that in Fatal Attractions, and it's crazy, and it leads to that story arc is where he rips the adamantium out of Wolverine's skeleton. So if we get to see that, I'm gonna lose my mind. if they do that, and then we get also Logan off Bone Claws doing Journey of Self-Discovery on the side plot, I will lose my mind. That's gonna be I don't know. They've gotten a little violent and aggressive in this show. There's been a little blood, but that might be a little too much for them. I'm not sure if they're willing to go that far, but the implications with them doing this storyline is crazy. That also leads to Onslaught too, which would also be insane to see animated out. There's like so many cool potential things from here. But even if they don't do any of that stuff, now setting up this kind of situation where Xavier's back, he's not too late, but he's definitely late, and there's this whole mess that he has to solve, and he's going to have to deal with Bastion as well as Magneto, who is just going to go full on, as Wolverine said, he declared war. So I think that we might they went back to showing the Asteroid M thing. I don't remember if Asteroid M is destroyed in this continuity or if it's just abandoned.
That's a great question. I think it might be abandoned, but it's
if
hard
not,
to
I think
know.
he's going back up there, and we're gonna get Exodus and oh man, there's just so much cool potential to come from this. Incredible display once again of like the power level of Omega level mutants to just like that's why he had to be taken off the board immediately because he could just shut the world down and turn all of the Sentinels off.
Right, exactly. It's why when you have, major, crossovers or huge events in Marvel, you always have to take characters like Adam Warlock out of play, or you have to, okay, well, the Silver Surfer doesn't want to get involved. You have to have those people, like you said, Nate. Magneto needed to be off the board from that moment onward. Otherwise, that first episode after Genosha, this would have, none of this would have happened because of the havoc he would have wreaked, not Alex Summers, but actual havoc. So, Eric, I want to talk to you about Magneto in this episode, starting with the image that you selected that our visual audience sees, but it's while he's still imprisoned, and we see the reflection of Sinister and some of those bottles of mysterious liquid.
Yeah, a lot of X's, by the way. They really they leaned hard into that letter throughout this episode as a visual cue. We get a lot of him in his underwear with his jacked chest and his good hair, and it just makes me feel
so ripped.
I know, it makes me feel like a lesser Eric yet again, and him being unleashed, I think, is the right way to look at it. Right? It's not released; it's unleashed.
Correct,
and so that idea of like, I'm gonna do that thing I've always had in my pocket that I've never taken out, I think is great. I did wonder, and I sent you an image like, wouldn't the planes all come down? I mean, again, it could be an interruption, so hopefully they would recover. But
I'm just lazily scrolling through all your images. Instead, I should have done this.
There it is.
I should have done it off camera, but yeah.
Oh, it's all good. But that was the one thing I was worried about is all these dudes are falling from the sky. I wasn't sure. I was curious actually about like, well, can they be recovered? Which I think they'll have to address over these next 2 episodes because apparently a lot of people signed up for this experimentation. I mean, and I thought that was also really fascinating was the volume, the sort of invasion of the body snatchers element of this. But yes, here he is in what my dad would call his Gotkas. Out there in the freezing cold, still showing off a firm backside to go with his firm front side. And he doesn't need no stinking clothes to change the whole world. A little bit of Superman 1970, was it 8?
78,
Yeah, a little Superman 1978 vibes, but it does feel earned. Like, we do know this guy's power. I mean, we've seen him in the movies lift entire football stadiums. Mind you, it's where the Washington football team played, so it's not much of a stadium. But
it's not that heavy.
Not that impressive. But in the end of it all, like, this is what happens when you unleash him. But it's smart. It's like a reset button, literally. So now they're picking up all these assorted bodies that are just laying about, and they're having to reassess, like, what's our next move. So I think it was smart how they used it. Then, of course, the 1-2 punch with Xavier coming back. Although, can you guys help me with this? Because it felt like they were watching the news. Xavier's back. Was there like not much of a reaction? Like, I don't recall. Like, did they?
They didn't seem to react. But I don't know. I mean, the way the show ended, I think that the way the original show ended, I guess they just assumed he was dead and that Lilandra was going to do what she could to help. But there was kind of a muted reaction. Before we move on to Charles, I wanted to talk about someone who's just lurking in the shadows throughout this episode, as he often is, which is Mr. Sinister, which, despite the goofy rhyming name that he has, is actually a very deep and rich character. And I like his admission that he's just using Bastion. He's like, hey, that guy's all right, but, I'm the real guy. And essentially, he has a line of dialogue early in the episode, Sinister does, where he essentially says, oh, I knew Mengele. Mengele was a friend of mine. Bastion is no Mengele, and it's
Weird
I mean
flex.
that's
Usually
the
that's
way
a compliment.
yeah, but not when you're Sinister.
Right.
He's just like, like, oh, Bastion's going to give me pens of mutants to experiment on. So yeah, I'm going to help him. I don't have to do
Mangala,
that.
more like Mangala. Thank you. Good night. I'll see myself out.
God, no. All right. Yeah. So we'll see Eric next week. I don't know. I like him too much. Forgive me. I try to make sure that everybody gets in the conversation. I asked you about Magneto, didn't I, Brody? Or are you still waiting patiently? I'm sorry.
Here's my question. No, you didn't. But here's my question about Magneto. He knows who attacked Genosha.
Yeah.
He knows that Bastion and or Sinister were responsible. Why isn't he going after them? Why is he punishing the whole planet? Because I thought he settled the thing with the humans earlier this season, that they were going to sort of accept them.
Yeah, but then they were a mass casualty event on mutants specifically, and the humans,
right, caused by Bastion and Sinister,
right,
not by humans.
So the human intolerance is being weaponized by Bastion against mutants. So Bastion even says, like, you guys done, fucked around, got Xavier killed, made him a martyr, made the mutants start looking good, had, Magneto, like, people were like, okay, maybe Magneto's not bad of a guy. So I just pushed the button and overwhelmed everyone with bad news and images. And then on the flip side, you start a narrative of like, oh, well, here's mutant retaliation. Here's this happening. Here's that happening. Right. And you use that to stoke hate, fear, which, as the Sith will tell you, fear leads to hate. Right. All that stuff.
Sure.
So I don't think that he should have done that, but I understand the character motivation of him having lived through the Holocaust, having this heel turn at the start of the season and being like, maybe my friend Xavier was right. Maybe we can coexist. Maybe we can do this for the better of mutants. Go to Genosha, see all this beautiful stuff, have this awesome connection moment with someone he cares about, as well as all of these people looking at him with adoration, just to watch them all decimated again, a second Holocaust. He gets captured and tortured by the guy who perpetrates it, who says to him, like, hey, like, I'm going to turn everyone against you. So he's going to slip back to his old ways of being a villain. Like, he is a bad guy.
While he was captured, he's not aware of all those things you just described. He was being held in a dungeon, tied up. I don't know if they were showing him news clips, but
just to move on from that point, the TV was on and they talked.
Okay.
He was aware the whole time. They didn't have him in one of those helmets.
You're right.
He didn't know anything.
Even if the TVs weren't there, as someone who has been fighting for rights of marginalized people, he is very familiar with how you can manipulate humans
100%
to do things. So
yeah, the problem is Bastion's from the future. And like you said, one of you guys said before that they knew Magneto was going to escape, right? Magneto attacking the humans is part of the plan. He wanted Magneto to get out, right? So that's why he left him with a woman he knew was going to let him out. And that's why he's not really going to kill her for doing it, because he expected her to do it. And Magneto's playing right into the hands of Bastion and Sinister. He's doing the thing that the humans were worried he would do.
Yeah, so again, like, this is not a fault in Magneto's characterization. This is another check mark on the box of Bastion being a master manipulator.
Yes.
And I wouldn't even so much attribute it to time travel, because in this show, he's not from the future. He's from here. He has like visions of stuff from the future because of his like connection with Nimrod, but this is not the same Bastion from the comics that is Nimrod, who went through the perilous portal thing.
Siege
came back.
Perilous. Yes.
Siege Perilous. All
Siege
that weird
Perilous,
stuff.
right?
This is a Nimrod who grew up here with the Sentinel stuff like in his mind. So he doesn't have the time travel stuff. He just knows
True.
Magneto. Like when you have a crazy guy who like wants to be a super violent extremist and then kind of gets pulled back to the edge and is questioning like, okay, well maybe I don't have to be like that. And then you push him. Of course he's going to blow up. Of course that was part of the plan. And this is what makes Magneto an interesting character, is that it's not that he's just like a misunderstood anti-hero. Like, no, he is a bad guy, and he, in his mind, he wants to do a good thing. He wants to protect mutants, but the lengths at which he's willing to go for it are what makes him a villain. And so having one villain play against another reformed villain to do the villain thing, so now you have two villains at the end of the season that the X-Men have to face, is fantastic villain work by Bastion, and also really great writing.
Yeah, I was just surprised he fell for the plot so quickly. I thought he'd at least go after Bastion and then do the thing he did.
I think that he saw the big picture, and sort of to this idea of him being, semi-reformed. The character of Magneto has tried to coexist with humans periodically, and then felt very differently. I like to think of the early season Magneto. The obvious comparison that everyone's making, I'm thinking of him as Andrew Dice Clay, when in the mid 90s, when he was doing a sitcom and he was billed as Andrew Clay, and then the show got canceled. He was always the Dice Man below the surface. He was putting on a good show. He still hated humans, but he's like, well, for Charles's sake, I'll see if I can put up with them, but I don't really like them, I think there's probably a more eloquent comparison, but my brain isn't big enough to really go with that. Nathan Church in the chat, wasn't Magneto just dudgeoned up in the same room? Bastion had his little Legion of Doom Zoom meeting. Yes, the Legion of Zoom, as it were. Thank you, Nathan, for joining us.
Who
Nathan,
was the woman in that meeting? He went to Dr. Doom, he went to Baron Zemo, and then there was a female.
Was that Madam Hydra, or possibly? Yeah, that's who I thought it was.
Okay.
At first, I thought it could have been sort of the counterpart to Vision / Ultron, Jocasta, which is essentially a female robot. I actually wasn't sure who that was.
I thought it could be Charles's sister, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Could be Madam Web.
Yeah. Or Julie Louis-Dreyfus, not her character.
No, just her.
From the MCU. No, Elaine Bennis from Seinfeld.
She did. I saw a kick once, so that may have been. Yeah.
Or
so obviously, the big ending for the episode, Professor Xavier is like, I hope I'm not too late. As Nate said, you're pretty late. Like, no, the entree's a little overcooked. All the sides have been toasted to a crisp. You're very late, Charles.
Yeah.
And thanks for crashing into the one part of the mansion that was still standing.
So yeah, and then being like, "Don't worry, guys. Everybody. We're under attack." And they're like, "Dude, we've been here. We know.
Yeah.
What do you
to me,
mean?
my X-Men, right?"
There's a chance that Storm didn't know, but because we saw her,
she at least saw the attack on TV.
Oh, that's
so
a good
like
point. Yeah.
She knew something at least.
Yeah, no. So obviously, that's going to be how we hit the ground running next week, and excited to finally have Charles back. I think it was good that they told the story the way they did a few weeks ago, where we knew he was coming back. Then, because another way to do this is to have him crash here, and then we get the flashback. So I think that the choice makes sense. I'm excited to see Charles. I know we've already gone a little long, so I want to finish up, but I want to get Jerry Springer style final thoughts from each of you, starting with you, Mr. Brody. Final thought as this episode's over and we look towards next week.
Well, I was surprised Cable missed so many bottles. I would have thought he was a better shot. The plural of Summers is Summerses. And I thought it was weird that Cyclops knows Cable hates him, and he's like, "Don't mess with the Summers." Like, Cable's got to be like, "Dude, we're not a team. Like, we're not." But overall, love the episode. As I think Nate said earlier before I joined on, I was watching on my phone that you could have put up with a whole episode of the Wolverine Nightcrawler fight.
That's what I wanted. That it,
Yeah, okay. It was that would have been enough for me. So whatever happens outside of that, it was a great episode. The fact that a lot happened in addition to that made it an even better episode. For me, best episode so far. And I'm excited that this is a 3-parter because if it's going to be Charles versus Magneto, old school, it looks like, right? So one philosophy against the other. Where's Rogue going to fall on this when she wakes up? And why didn't Nightcrawler bamf her out of the room if he was so worried about her?
All good questions. I think that he probably needed to get Wolverine's back, but yes, he could have teleported her somewhere to safety and then come back. But
100%.
Fair
Well,
questions.
I was assuming she was hooked up to like an EKG machine or,
Oh,
or
yeah.
Yeah, I think
something.
you might be
She was
right.
in like a hospital bed, and when they rolled her out later, she was in the same bed. So
Yeah, right.
I actually thought we were gonna get like the shot of her laying in bed and her eyes were gonna activate like all of these Sentinel humans. So I thought we were getting that, but then we didn't. So Eric, quick final thought from you, sir, about what your thoughts are as we head into the really the home stretch, the final 2 episodes of X-Men 97 starting next week.
Well, just an additional thought on that too. I think in some ways, like there's nowhere they could put her that she'd be safe. In some ways, like she was safest there with them, because what he puts her somewhere else, all of a sudden, like who knows what's going to get to her. Yeah, that scene that was the set piece we were all salivating for, and we got it, and it was still beyond what we had hoped. But yeah, this is that moment where we get the point of view of what it looks like to teleport, which I thought was a really great visual. I think they've set themselves up beautifully for a strong ending. Christian, you did say if you ran the X-Men series, what it would be. I would hope you would dramatize all your various letters to the editor that you've written over the years as its own little bizarro what if.
I was never published. X-Men usually needed the extra page and didn't have much of a letters page, so I knew better than to try and write to them. So I would write to Solo Avengers and Marvel Tales, and I got published in both. So
and Archie Comics.
No, we can't even pretend that I had any interest in Archie Comics at any point in my life. I
Did you get a no prize?
I have something of a reputation to preserve.
some things you can't joke about.
Thank you. Yeah. And someone in watching us on Twitch, which a lot of people don't, shouldn't that school on the top left be on fire? Which is, of course, Xavier School behind me. I'll see what I can do. And Cami Egan, terrific episode. I want to see Cable accept Scott as his father, but not holding my breath. I agree with Brody. Professor X versus Magneto is going to happen soon. As we wind down, Nate, I want to get to sort of your final thoughts, just like all of us, as we head into the final, probably about 60 minutes of content that we're going to get over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of been just enjoying the show up until this episode, and now I've reached the there's so many breadcrumbs and plot lines and stuff that have been set up that now I'm at the now I'm actively theorizing like all the different directions and things that they could go. But I am very excited to get this new reinvigorated, refreshed X-Men animation stuff that we've been getting with the old, just give me Xavier and Magneto and let them just send child soldiers at each other. And yeah, I think I really am glad that they're doing a 3-parter for this one, because this last episode was the first one for me that really felt kind of crammed and rushed, in the sense of like the pace was like really fast. Like that whole last part with Xavier, we talked about them like not really reacting to him like being back. Like I felt like all of that last like 3 minutes was just like kind of crammed in, which does make me excited for the next 2 episodes. To like, if they had to cram that in, like how packed are these other 2 episodes with what's going to happen. The only thing I'm not excited for is for this show to end and then the really long wait for the next season to start. But at least then we can all just theorize about what's going to happen. I really liked it. Great episode. Maybe the best episode. It's hard with the Genosha one because that one is so shocking. But I think this one, in terms of like all of the different action sequences, as well as really good like writing and like Bastion, all the Bastion stuff, I think this might be the one for me.
Yeah, I think for me it's very similar. It's sort of like 1 and 1A, and depending on how this story continues over the next 2 weeks, obviously if we are going to end up looking at it as, one story over 3 episodes, I think that's going to be huge. Well, as we mentioned earlier, each of the next couple weeks while the show is winding down, the last 2 episodes, the penultimate next week, we will be here Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And Daniel Drew asking a question. I wonder what happened to Bishop. Oh, they're going to tell us. Don't worry. He'll show up at exactly the right moment, I would assume. So you will find us on Geekscape on the YouTube channel, but please subscribe to the audio version if you want to consume the show that way. I usually try to get it up within a few hours after we finish, and so you can always listen to it that way. So I appreciate everybody joining us. We had a lot of engagement with the chat, which is always the best part of doing the show live like this, so we can hear from all of you. In the meantime, I want to make sure that everybody knows how they can keep in touch with each of us. Eric Connor, where can you be found other than yesterday at Coffee Commissary with a comedy legend and myself?
You can also find me, Count Eric Connor, over at Instagram and at X, which some will still call Twitter, as they should.
Yeah, and David Brody, where can people find you and the Brooklyn Boys?
By the way, Eric, I'm believing that maybe that's a morph doll you're holding, not a Juggernaut doll.
It's heavy like Jug, but
Okay.
light like Morph.
Very good. You could find me at David Brody on most social media. That's BRODY. And of course, the Brooklyn Boys podcast on all your podcast platforms.
And Nate Miller, where can people find you?
X. Wow, now you got me saying X. Ew. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram. Dog like Nate with 2 G's.
2 G's, yes. Thank you. And I believe our friend Katie Hampton will be back with us next week. She's finally done wasting her time on her honeymoon, traveling throughout Europe. And now she's going to get back to the real fun of hanging out with us, talking about X-Men. If you haven't had enough of me, and about 40 minutes for our live audience over on my YouTube channel, Blackcast, BLADTCAST, I am going to spend some time with comedian Don Jameson, whose new comedy album, No Sleep Till McSorley's, debuted at #1 on the comedy charts. Take that, Weird Al Yankovic. So join me over there on the Blackcast. You can always subscribe there. BLADTCAST. And of course, my show, Who Are These Broadcasters, which I do with Eric Zane over on the Who Are These Podcasts YouTube channel. That is all the time we have for now. But until next week, as the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior!